Ryan Carter stood in his home office, staring at the framed wedding photo on his desk. 14 years of marriage captured in a single, joyful moment. He wore a sharp black tuxedo, while Emily, his wife, beamed in her flowing white gown, her arms wrapped around his. Their love felt unshakable back then, a promise captured forever in silver and glass. Now, the same frame felt cold in his hands, like it contained someone else's memories. Ryan traced the edge with his fingers, his mind replaying the laughter, the vows, the first dance. He had been 45 on their wedding day, and Emily 39. He'd thought they had it all figured out, a life built on trust. The sound of Emily's hushed laughter drifted up from the living room below, yanking him out of his reverie. Another late-night phone call. She thought he was asleep, just like every other night for the past 4 months. Ryan glanced at his watch, 11:32 p.m. Right on schedule. He closed his laptop and moved silently to the office door, leaving it open just enough to hear her words more clearly. Emily's voice carried up the stairs, low but unmistakably familiar. "I miss you too." "No, he's asleep upstairs." "I know, baby. Just a little longer. We'll figure it out soon." Ryan's jaw tightened, but he forced himself to stay still, listening. Each word felt like a shard of glass, driving deeper into the cracks of their one solid foundation. He pulled out his phone and opened a hidden folder where he'd been documenting everything. Tonight would join the long list of betrayals. December 12th, 11:32 p.m. Phone call from living room. Whispering and laughing. Duration, 18 minutes. The entry joined dozens of others, a meticulous record stretching back over 100 days. Ryan was a man of details, always thorough, always deliberate. He hadn't built his architecture firm, Carter Designs, by overlooking the fine print. And now, he was using those same skills to piece together the puzzle of his wife's betrayal. Walking to the bathroom, Ryan turned on the light, wincing at the stark glare of the mirror. It revealed a man worn down by months of sleepless nights and relentless suspicion. His dark brown eyes, usually sharp with focus, were now rimmed with exhaustion. His salt and pepper hair, which Emily once said made him look distinguished, seemed more gray than ever. At 59, he still cut an impressive figure, but stress had left its mark, subtle lines etched deeper around his mouth, shadows darker under his eyes. He splashed cold water on his face, trying to shake off the weariness. Downstairs, Emily's voice softened, her laughter melting into a lull of conversation. He heard the faint creak of floorboards as she moved, probably checking to make sure he was still in bed. Ryan turned the faucet on full blast, letting the water mask any sound of movement. A moment later, her footsteps retreated back to the living room. He waited until he was sure she was out of earshot before leaning against the counter, gripping its edge. In the mirror, his reflection stared back at him, unflinching. This wasn't the same man who had stood beside Emily at the altar all those years ago. That man had been hopeful, perhaps even a little naive. He hadn't known to look for the signs, the sudden distance, the whispered phone calls, the lies tucked into easy smiles. When the floorboards creaked again, Ryan straightened. Emily's voice cut off mid-sentence, as if she'd heard something. He waited a beat, then made his footsteps deliberately heavy as he walked toward their bedroom, giving her enough time to end the call. The house fell silent as he slid under the covers. 20 minutes later, Emily joined him, moving quietly through the darkened room. The familiar scent of her perfume, Chanel No. 5, a gift he bought her last Christmas, filled the air as she passed by his side of the bed. "Good night, sweetheart," she whispered, her tone overly sweet. Ryan's breathing remained steady, feigning sleep. The mattress dipped as she settled in, maintaining the careful distance between them that had become their unspoken norm. In the darkness, Ryan opened his eyes and stared at the ceiling, his mind racing. Morning arrived with the sharp buzz of Ryan's alarm at 6 a.m. He moved through his routine like clockwork, shower, shave, a freshly pressed suit. The armor of a man determined to keep up appearances. Each action was deliberate, mechanical, part of the carefully constructed facade he'd maintained for months. When he came downstairs, Emily was already in the kitchen, her hair pulled back into a sleek ponytail. She wore a fitted navy blouse he didn't recognize, paired with her usual gold bracelet that clinked softly as she moved. The scent of fresh coffee filled the air, courtesy of the expensive machine they'd splurged on last year. Her phone buzzed against the granite countertop, and she grabbed it quickly, fingers flying across the screen. Ryan watched her from the doorway, his expression neutral. "Important message?" he asked casually, reaching for a mug. Emily startled slightly, as if she hadn't noticed him. "Oh, just work stuff. You know how Caroline gets when we're on deadline." Caroline, her colleague at the marketing firm. Another lie, Ryan thought, filing it away silently. He knew exactly who the message was from, the same person she'd been whispering to the night before. The same contact whose name she changed to Caroline in her phone. Ryan poured his coffee, adding a splash of cream. "Will you be home for dinner tonight?" Emily hesitated, her hand tightening around her phone. "Actually, I might have to work late. This campaign has been a nightmare." Ryan stirred his coffee slowly, his eyes fixed on her reflection in the kitchen window. "On a Friday? You know how it is in marketing," she said with a forced laugh. "Deadlines wait for no one. Don't wait up if I'm not back by dinner." He nodded, taking a sip of his coffee. "Actually, I might wrap up early today. I should be home by 5. Her hand faltered slightly as she set her mug down. "Oh, that's nice. But like I said, I'll probably be late." "Of course." The campaign. Ryan watched her gather her things, her movements quick and slightly jerky, just enough to betray her unease. "Have a good day," Emily said, his voice steady. She paused at the door, a flicker of something, guilt, maybe, crossing her face. "You too, sweetheart," she replied, then slipped out. The moment the door closed, Ryan set his mug down and pulled out his phone. Opening the tracking app he'd installed months ago, he watched the blue dot that represented Emily's location. Instead of heading toward her office downtown, the dot moved in the opposite direction. Ryan spent the next hour in his home office, meticulously reviewing his notes and calendar. He didn't need much more evidence, but this wasn't just about proving infidelity. It was about control. The exactness of his plan had been months in the making. At 10 a.m., he met with his lawyer, Catherine Grant, in her office in downtown Boston. Catherine, a seasoned divorce attorney in her early 50s, greeted him with her usual no-nonsense demeanor. "Morning, Ryan." She set a folder on the table between them. "I've gone over everything one last time. The house sale is finalized, the asset transfers are complete, and all utilities will be disconnected on Monday. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed?" Ryan didn't hesitate. "Completely." "And the evidence?" He pulled out his phone, showing her the photos, call logs, and credit card records he'd collected. The most recent addition was a photo from his private investigator, Emily entering an upscale condo building in Back Bay. She greeted a man at the door with a kiss. "Mark Sullivan," Catherine said, scanning the report. 36, financial consultant, divorced. "Quite the charmer." Ryan nodded. "He's the one." Catherine closed the folder with a satisfied click. "This is a solid case. Most people let emotions cloud their judgment in situations like this, but you've been incredibly thorough." "I didn't have the luxury of acting on emotion," Ryan replied. "I needed to be prepared." Catherine handed him the final paperwork to sign. "Once these are filed, the divorce papers will be served tomorrow. The movers are scheduled for this evening, and the new owners will take possession Monday morning." "Good," Ryan said, signing with a steady hand. "It's time." As Ryan left Catherine's office, his phone buzzed. A message from his private investigator. "Subject has arrived at 125 Beacon Street. Photos incoming." A moment later, several images appeared. Emily was sitting in a corner booth at a cafe, her hands clasped across the table from a man Ryan didn't recognize. It wasn't Mark Sullivan. Curious, Ryan saved the photos and called his PI. "Who's the new guy?" "I'm still running checks," the investigator replied. "No obvious links yet, but I'll have a full report by tomorrow. For now, just thought you'd want to know." Ryan frowned but didn't respond. He ended the call and stared at the photos again. Emily's expression was soft, even wistful, a stark contrast to the calculating demeanor she often wore around him. Whoever this man was, he wasn't part of her usual pattern. Ryan parked his car a block away from the house at 5:47 p.m., his heart steady as he prepared for what was to come. Daniel's sleek black BMW sat brazenly in the driveway. The sight only solidified his resolve. Ryan glanced at his watch, 5:58 p.m. Right on schedule. He walked deliberately up the path to the front door. From inside, muffled laughter spilled out. Emily's melodic giggle mixed with a man's deeper chuckle. Ryan hesitated briefly, his hand on the doorknob, then turned the key. The lock clicked smoothly, and he stepped inside. The laughter stopped abruptly. Ryan's eyes landed on Emily and Mark sitting on the couch, a bottle of wine on the coffee table between them. Emily's blouse was unbuttoned at the collar, her cheeks flushed. Mark, a polished man in his mid-30s, leaned back casually, his arms stretched along the back of the couch as if he owned the place. Ryan! Emily jumped to her feet, her face draining of color. "You're home early." "Clearly," Ryan replied, his tone steady, his expression unreadable. Mark stood slowly, adjusting the cuffs of his tailored suit jacket. "Well, this is unexpected," he said, a smirk playing at the corner of his mouth. Ryan didn't respond, his gaze shifting between the two. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Emily's hands fluttered uselessly at her sides. It's not what it looks like." "It's not," Ryan finally said, raising an eyebrow. Mark stepped forward, his smirk widening. "Look, Ryan, let's not make this more awkward than it needs to be. These things happen. People grow apart. You should have seen this coming." Ryan's eyes hardened. "Is that so?" Emily straightened, her initial panic morphing into defiance. "Ryan, we need to talk about this about us. Things haven't been right between us for a long time. Mark and we just save it." Ryan's voice cut through her excuses like a blade. "I've heard enough." Mark chuckled, clearly enjoying himself. "You got to admit, man, she deserves more than whatever this was. Routine spreadsheets, the same old grind. She wanted something exciting, something real." "Exciting?" Ryan repeated, his lips curving into a cold smile. "You mean like selling this house 3 weeks ago?" Mark's smirk faltered. "What?" Emily's face went pale. What are you talking about?" Ryan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folder, setting it neatly on the coffee table. "The house was in my name, Emily. I finalized the sale weeks ago. The movers will be here in 30 minutes to clear everything out for the new owners." "You're lying." Emily snapped, her voice rising. Mark grabbed the folder and flipped it open, his eyes scanning the notarized documents. His expression darkened as he realized the truth. This can't be legal," Emily stammered, her voice cracking. "It's perfectly legal," Ryan replied. "Every asset in this house has already been transferred. The utilities will be disconnected Monday morning. By the way, Emily, your credit cards, the joint accounts, all frozen. Consider it part of our divorce settlement." Mark set the folder down, his earlier smugness evaporating. "Divorce? Wait, you're already divorcing him?" Ryan gave a low chuckle. "She didn't tell you?" "Of course not. That might have complicated things for you, wouldn't it, Mark?" Emily turned to Mark, her desperation spilling over. "Mark, we can figure this out. Don't listen to him. He's trying to manipulate us." But Mark was already backing away, shaking his head. "Figure this out? Are you kidding me? You said this house was yours, that you had assets. You didn't mention you were in the middle of a divorce." Ryan leaned against the doorway, watching as Emily's world unraveled. "Mark, don't leave," Emily begged as he grabbed his coat and headed toward the door. Mark paused, glancing over his shoulder. "I can't afford to be caught up in this mess. You've lied about everything, Emily. I'm not sticking around to clean up your disaster." He walked out without another word, the slam of the door reverberating through the now empty living room. Emily turned to Ryan, her hands clenched into fists. "You planned all of this, didn't you? The sale, the accounts, everything." Ryan didn't deny it. "Of course I did. You thought I wasn't paying attention, Emily. You thought I'd just sit back and let you make a fool of me." Her eyes filled with tears. "I loved you once, Ryan. You didn't have to do this." "Love me?" He scoffed. "You didn't love me. You loved what you thought you could get away with." The sound of a truck pulling up outside broke the tension. Ryan glanced at his watch, 6:30 p.m. Right on time. "The movers are here," he said, his voice devoid of emotion. "You should start packing anything that's personally yours. Everything else belongs to the new owners." Emily's composure shattered. Where am I supposed to go? That's not my problem, Ryan replied coolly. He turned and walked out the door, leaving Emily standing alone in the shell of the life they'd built together. The sound of tires crunching against the gravel driveway jolted Emily from her stupor. Through the window, she watched as two movers stepped out of a large truck, their uniforms crisp, their movements efficient. The logo on the side read, Beacon Elite Moving Services. The taller mover, Mike, knocked on the door, clipboard in hand. Emily opened it hesitantly, her tear-streaked face a stark contrast to her usual polished appearance. Evening, ma'am, Mike said politely. We're here for the scheduled 6:30 p.m. removal. Shouldn't take more than a few hours. There's been a mistake, Emily blurted. This is my house. You can't just take everything. Mike flipped through the paperwork on his clipboard. According to our records, the property was sold 3 weeks ago. Everything here is set to be cleared out for the new owners. You're welcome to take anything personally yours, but everything else goes. Emily stared at him, her chest tightening as reality crashed down around her. Behind Mike, the second mover was already unloading dollies and packing supplies from the truck. You can't do this, she shouted, her voice rising. Ma'am, we're just doing our job, Mike replied evenly. Emily slammed the door and stumbled back into the emptying living room. Her phone buzzed insistently on the coffee table, and she snatched it up, hoping for an answer, a lifeline. Instead, she saw a flood of messages, none of them comforting. Caroline, work colleague. I heard what happened. How could you do this to Ryan? Don't bother coming to the office Monday. HR is already involved. Emily's mother. Your father and I are disgusted. You've embarrassed this family. Don't expect help from us. Rachel, her best friend. Mark? Really? And now this mess with Ryan? You've burned every bridge. Emily. Don't call me. Her world was collapsing in real time. Each message a hammer blow to the carefully curated life she had spent years building. Emily was still scrolling through her phone when another car pulled into the driveway. This time, it wasn't a truck, but Mark's sleek black BMW. Relief surged through her as she rushed to the door, throwing it open. But Mark wasn't alone. A strikingly beautiful woman stepped out of the passenger seat. Her black hair was pulled into an elegant bun, her tailored blazer highlighting her sharp features. She exuded confidence, her piercing green eyes locking onto Emily with a mix of pity and disdain. Mark, Emily began, her voice trembling. Who is this? The woman smiled coldly. I'm Claire, Mark's fiancée. Emily staggered backward, the weight of the revelation hitting her like a freight train. Fiancé? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, Claire replied. Her tone clipped. He didn't tell you? Of course he didn't. He has a habit of forgetting important details when he's chasing shiny new distractions. Claire, this isn't the time, Mark muttered, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. Oh, I think it's exactly the time, Claire shot back, her gaze never leaving Emily. Emily turned to Mark, desperation spilling over. You told me you loved me. You said we had a future together. Mark's face hardened. What I said was that we had potential. But you failed to mention that you were broke, divorced, and living in a house you don't even own anymore. Claire laughed softly, a sound as sharp as glass. It's almost poetic, really. You chasing after a fantasy of wealth and status, while the rug was being pulled out from under you. Emily felt her knees buckle, but she forced herself to stay upright. You can't just leave me like this, she said, her voice breaking. Mark sighed, already stepping back toward his car. I can, and I am. Claire and I have plans. Real plans. Enjoy sorting out your mess, Emily. As the BMW disappeared down the street, Emily stood frozen in the doorway. Behind her, the movers were diligently packing up the remnants of her life. She turned back inside, her bare feet cold against the hardwood floor. The divorce papers Ryan had left on the coffee table stared back at her, mocking her. Among the pages, she found a handwritten note in Ryan's precise handwriting. Ryan's letter. Emily, I'm sure by now you've realized that I've been aware of your affair for months. Every lie, every late-night call, every secret meeting, I documented it all. You underestimated me, believing I was too predictable, too routine to see the truth. But predictability is a strength. It allowed me to plan every step of this so that you'd feel the weight of what you've done. You wanted freedom? I'm giving it to you. Freedom from this house, this marriage, and the life you so clearly despised. The settlement is fair. You'll get exactly what the law requires and nothing more. I hope he was worth it. Ryan. Emily sank to the floor, her trembling hands clutching the letter. Tears blurred her vision, but no amount of crying could undo what had been set in motion. Across town, Ryan sat in the minimalist living room of his new high-rise apartment. The expansive windows offered a sweeping view of Boston's skyline, the city lights twinkling like stars against the night. He sipped a glass of Glenlivet 18-year-old scotch, savoring the smoky warmth as he leaned back in his chair. On his laptop screen, a notification from the moving company confirmed. Property cleared. Keys transferred to new owners. Ryan exhaled, the weight of months of planning finally lifting. His phone buzzed on the table, and he picked it up to see a message from Catherine, his lawyer. Divorce papers served. Evidence documented. Everything proceeding as planned. Another message quickly followed, this time from his private investigator. Sullivan left the premises at 7:48 p.m. Emily remains. Movers are finishing up. No incidents reported. Satisfied, Ryan closed his laptop and turned off the notifications. He didn't need to watch the chaos unfold. He already knew how the story would end. His new apartment was a stark contrast to the home he had shared with Emily. Gone were the antiques and carefully curated decor she had insisted on. Instead, his space was clean, modern, and personal. This was his sanctuary, a place untouched by betrayal. Ryan's focus shifted to a blueprint spread across the table, a new project he was spearheading for Carter Designs. The project, a revitalization of Boston's waterfront district, had been in the works for months. His phone buzzed again, interrupting his thoughts. This time, it was a call from an unknown number. Ryan Carter, he answered, his tone professional. Mr. Carter, this is Rachel Hampton, senior editor at the Boston Globe. I came across your firm's work on the Seaport Revitalization Project, and I'd love to feature you in an upcoming piece. Ryan's eyebrows lifted. That's unexpected. I'd be happy to discuss it. As Rachel outlined the details, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of quiet satisfaction. This project wasn't just about work. It was about building something lasting, something untainted by the mess of his personal life. Back at 125 Maple Drive, Emily sat alone on the bare floor of what had once been her living room. The movers had finished hours ago, leaving her with nothing but her purse and the clothes on her back. Her phone buzzed again, and she hesitated before glancing at the screen. Another message, this time from the new owners. We've arrived to begin moving in. Please vacate the premises by 10 a.m. tomorrow. Failure to comply will result in legal action. She closed her eyes, her chest tightening. Every avenue of escape had been cut off. Her parents, her friends, even Mark, no one was willing to help. Desperation clawed at her as she scrolled through her contacts. Each call went straight to voicemail. Her fingers hovered over Ryan's name, but she quickly pulled her hand away. He had made his position clear. The next morning, Ryan sat in the boardroom of Carter Designs, reviewing plans for the waterfront project. The team had gathered for a final presentation before submitting their proposal to the city council. As he listened to his junior architect pitch their vision, his phone vibrated silently on the table. He glanced at the screen and saw a message from Catherine. Emily has vacated the property. The new owners have confirmed possession. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days. Everything is proceeding smoothly. Ryan allowed himself a small, private smile. Not one of gloating or triumph, but of quiet resolution. When the meeting concluded, he returned to his office, a spacious corner room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. From here, Boston sprawled out before him, a city full of opportunity, promise, and a fresh start. He pulled open the bottom drawer of his desk and retrieved the wedding photo he'd taken from the house. The silver frame glinted in the sunlight, reflecting a moment that now felt like a distant memory. Without hesitation, Ryan dropped it into the shredder. The machine whirred softly as the photo disappeared, strip by strip, until nothing remained. He turned back to his desk, The waterfront blueprint spread out before him. The past was gone, filed away like an old project. Ryan raised his glass to the city skyline. To new beginnings, he murmured, and with that, he returned to his work, focused on the future ahead.